This is the Bondi X in the Fresh Foam More version 3. Each shoe was a bit of a surprise in its own right, but together they assure us that the max cushion genre is still alive and kicking. But which is the better shoe? It's time to lace them up and take them for a ride. .07 miles, 8 minutes, 54 seconds, and 136 beats per minute on average for today's long run, which was also a bit of a recovery run in the Hoka Bondi X. And earlier in the week, I went for a similar run, 10 miles and change, in the New Balance Fresh Foam More version 3, also on a recovery run, so I can compare these two shoes head to head. Now, before I give you my thoughts on these two shoes, not only in a recovery perspective, but in shoes head to head in general, I do want to go over some disclosures. The Bondi X was a pair of shoes that was sent to me by Hoka for the purpose of review, and the Fresh Foam More version 3 is a pair of shoes that was sent to me by Roadrunner Sports, also for the purpose of review. However, no one's paying me to make this video or to include either of these shoes in a video, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with those disclosures out of the way, let's talk about the Bondi X and the Fresh Foam More version 3. First, let's get to some specs. Let's talk about the Bondi X first. The Bondi X, even though it looks like one of the biggest shoes you've ever seen, it's actually not even close to being the tallest shoe in my lineup. And in this battle, it is the shorter stack height shoe, coming in at 33 millimeters of stack height in the heel and 28 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot, giving us a 5 millimeter drop and coming in at a weight of 10.6 ounces. In that midsole, we've got Hoka's compression molded EVA, so it's borrowing a lot of that same technology and geometry from the Bondi, which it derives its name. But this shoe also has a carbon fiber plate to go along with that stack height, the wide base, and the rocker geometry. On the outsole, there is strategically placed rubber, plus there's also kind of the signature X pattern that's in all the X shoes in Hoka's lineup, so you could see the carbon right through some of these holes. On the upper, we have embroidered TPU yarns, and what is overall a relatively speaking for a max cushion shoe, and especially for a Bondi, a relatively restrained upper, especially kind of like in the toe box, forefoot, even into the midfoot cage. There is a perforated EVA tongue, which some people have been saying is a little bit on the short side. For me, it's just fine. I don't like tall tongues. I don't like puffy tongues. This tongue for me is just fine. There is a little bit more padding once you get to the heel, and you can kind of see it. It looks a little bit awkward to me, the transition from kind of like a sleek and like breathable upper to like cushioned shoe in the back, but there is that transition here. There's ample amount of cushion. You got quite a bit of structure in this heel cup, and it also has a gigantic pull tab. In the back, there is that swallowtail design, which you've been seeing in a lot of Hoka shoes for this year, and an extended crash pad to give you extra amount of pillowy, soft goodness if you are a heel striker. Also, to aid in the ultimate comfort of this shoe is an Ortholite liner to give you just that extra bit of softness with each step. Now let's talk about the New Balance Fresh Foam More version 3. As I said, this is the taller shoe of the bunch, and it's not like it's a sleeper shoe in terms of stack height. It looks like a tall shoe, but it is also taller than the Bondi X. This Fresh Foam More version 3 comes in at 38 millimeters of stack height in the heel, and it comes down to 34 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot for a 4 millimeter drop. And overall, this entire package comes in at 10.4 ounces. In that midsole, there's no carbon plate in this. There's just nothing but that Fresh Foam X material that New Balance has been using to great success, and I think this is a really great implementation of it here in the Fresh Foam More version 3. On the outsole, we've got strategically placed pads of rubber, and we have a very wide base, even wider than the Bondi X, so you have plenty of kind of area to distribute a lot of the impact forces, and also to keep you from tipping over one side or the other. On the upper, we've got engineered mesh, which is as breathable as it can be given all the amount of kind of stuff that's in the upper. There is a lot of stuff going on in this shoe. The tongue is a pretty padded tongue, lots of texture to it on the top of the tongue right underneath the laces, and then moving around towards the heel collar, you've got lots of padding even up into the heel flare, and you have a little bit of a more flexible heel in the Fresh Foam More version 3, but a lot of like kind of the structure of this heel in the Fresh Foam More version 3, as in the Bondi X, is also being aided by the sculpting of the foam as it kind of cups the heel. There's also kind of like this extra embroidered layer along the back to give, I think, a little bit more of that structural support, but just to add a little bit more, because after all, this is the Fresh Foam More version 3. So with those specs out of the way, let's now talk about what it was like to run in each of these shoes. So I think that even though both these shoes are really tall and they're very wide in terms of like the platform that you're landing on, they're very different in terms of the ride dynamics for me. So for me, I feel like the Bondi X is a very smooth shoe. I feel like that geometry is really well constructed. So it's not that it's the softest material, although Hoka tells us that it is the softest foam that it has ever put into a shoe. And I think that that's probably right. Of all the Hoka shoes that I've tested, I feel like I'm getting the most squish out of the EVA here, but also the impact is very smooth as you're going through the foot strike as well. So I just think that that rocker design is working really well in this shoe. Even though I am more of a midfoot and forefoot striker, I'm still feeling that as well and getting a lot of that smoothness that's coming through. The carbon fiber plate also helps add into a little bit of stability, because if you've got something that's super squishy, if you land on it a little bit kind of to the side, if it's like too squishy, you're just going to tip over on one side or the other. So that carbon fiber plate helps in kind of like balancing out some of that extra squishiness, but it also provides a little bit of extra kind of oomph to get out of the compression. And as you're springing forward, it gives you a little bit more of that kind of like push or shove forward. It's a subtle but pleasant carbon feeling that you're getting in the Bondi X. In contrast to like the smoothness that I'm getting with the Bondi X, not to say that the Fresh Foam More isn't smooth, I'm getting more of a bouncy sensation. So I feel like with the Fresh Foam X, it feels like almost like kind of like a pingy sensation to it, but you're getting it kind of diffused over like the wide base and the thick stack height here. So I feel like it's not only absorbing impacts, but also like giving you kind of like a little bit of a pushback in a pretty quick fashion, which that in turn, kind of like what the carbon is doing for the Bondi X, the bounciness of the Fresh Foam X and the Fresh Foam More 3, ooh, a lot of fresh foams in there, that bounciness is kind of like scooping you out of the compression. The other sensation that I get from the Fresh Foam More version 3 is that it just does a little bit better of a job of kind of absorbing everything that's underfoot. Like if you are looking for a way to run without feeling anything that you're stepping on, the Fresh Foam More version 3 is kind of the shoe that you're looking for. So I would say, like, strictly from a recovery shoe perspective, I do like the New Balance Fresh Foam More version 3 a little bit better, because like in that first mile, like after a tough workout, and I wore the Fresh Foam More version 3 the day after I set a 5K PR. That following next day, I just wanted something like really easy to just ease into that like next day's run. And the Fresh Foam More version 3 was absolutely perfect. Now, even though the Bondi X I don't think is quite as good of a recovery shoe as the Fresh Foam More version 3, I do think that there are other strengths that the Bondi X has. So another way to kind of contrast these two shoes is I think that the Bondi X is a little bit more work oriented. So like a long run day, I think that this is the perfect time to get that Bondi X out, or a long run day that might have a little bit of faster paces, maybe not anything as close to like 10K or 5K pace, but if you're getting to moderate paces or up to marathon pace, I think that the Bondi X is a great way to kind of have a lot of impact absorption, have a smooth ride, and still have a little bit of carbon so that you can hit those paces and get that work in just a little bit easier. The Fresh Foam More version 3, at no point do I ever feel like that shoe really wants to pick up the pace. It's a little bit wider, and it just seems to be like a little bit more relaxed. It's a great shoe to throw on for those recovery days, or if you're just getting together with the group run and you're just going out for a nice, easy, long run, hanging out with your friends and just enjoying company, like this is a really great shoe that you can kind of just set it and forget it and enjoy the run. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of like the fit and what I'm thinking about the uppers. I feel like the fit on the Bondi X is a little bit more snug than the Fresh Foam More version 3. So, and again, going to more of a recovery perspective, I'd rather have my feet in the Fresh Foam More version 3 than I would in the Bondi X. But I think that kind of relative snugness for a max cushion shoe of the Bondi X makes it make a lot more sense when you're using it for those long runs that might have some marathon pace miles in it. So it all kind of fits and makes sense together. The Fresh Foam More, on the other hand, is like, it's elaborate, it's ornate, it's got overlays, it's got embroidery, it's got puffiness, it's got Achilles flares, it's got just a lot of stuff on it. And I think for what the shoe is, the More version 3, I think it really works there for it as well. It's not like the coolest of shoes in terms of temperature. Like I really didn't reach for the shoe very much in the hottest days of summer, but now the temperatures are cooling down, we're heading towards some colder weather running. This is a shoe that's going to be very easy for me to reach for. So with that being said about both of these shoes, it's time for me to pick a champion. And I think putting these two shoes head to head between the Bondi X and the Fresh Foam More version 3, I think I'm going to pick the Fresh Foam More version 3. I do prefer what the Fresh Foam More version 3 is doing when it comes to like recovery runs and long, easy runs. So that's why I'm going to pick the New Balance Fresh Foam More version 3. If you have any questions about either of these two shoes, put them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you there. Or better yet, feel free to stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I'd love to talk to you in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?